This week, we heard from CDPR, their quarterly results resulting from the past year of Cyberpunk sales, and it was a bit of an odd presentation. Sales are up of Cyberpunk, given that it has been restored to the PlayStation Store and it has been getting fixes for a very long time now, but overall profit is down, and it was revealed that 65% or so of CDPR is still working on fixing Cyberpunk and building future DLC for it, which is a very significant part of the studio, hundreds and hundreds of people. And so it is very clear that CDPR is sticking with Cyberpunk in the long term. The question is in part whether Cyberpunk itself can kind of turn around and become this, reversal success story for them where they make the game, what it was supposed to be in the first place before it launched very prematurely. And yet, it's kind of an odd situation because Cyberpunk is already a massive hit. By hit, I do not mean critical hit or audience hit, but I do mean financial hit because it sold a truly, truly massive amount of copies. And despite all the issues, there were not that many refunds. Last we heard, I think sales were approaching 15 million, but CDPR has not shared additional sales for a very long time because they kind of dropped off a cliff once everyone realized that the game wasn't good. And yet so many people bought it in the first place, it didn't really matter. And for those initial Cyberpunk sales dwarfed everything they've ever done with The Witcher by a mile. Like, it was not even close if you look at the graphs. And so I think they are committed to getting the game where it was supposed to be. I think they are committed to getting DLC out. And yet what I think they need to be committed to is regaining player trust. And this has been, it's hard to understate just how much of a reversal CDPR has seen in player trust from the days of The Witcher. The Witcher 3 earned them so much goodwill among so many segments of the gaming population. The game was extremely high quality. They supported it well. They released timely DLC for it that was much larger than some entire other games and yet did not cost an arm and a leg comparatively. And they were heralded as one of kind of the top developers in the entire industry as a result of that. That's how good The Witcher 3 was for them. The previous Witcher games were also good, but The Witcher 3 kind of elevated things to a new level. And now it's the utter opposite. And CDPR has become this kind of meme of a combination of like corporate overreach and executives rushing things out before they're ready. And then they are the manifestation of this idea that these giant AAA games are never going to launch intact. But in this case, we are almost 9 months after the release of the game now, and it is still getting massive, massive, massive patches that are fixing hundreds of bugs at a time, that are reworking fundamental core systems in the game that should have been fixed by launch. And everything they have said that was coming to the game has been delayed. The free DLC was supposed to be out in earlier this year. We just got a few tiny pieces of it recently, and the next-gen versions of the game now may slip until next year, so those won't be out for over a year since the last release. Another problem that has gone along with this, though, is like CDPR they may have been doing a lot to fix Cyberpunk 27 itself. It's just they have not done very much to kind of reassure fans that they are back on track and they are committed to regaining player trust. Because it is either silence or it is talking to investors, or a long, long time ago, it was kind of half-hearted apologies that didn't ring true. Like, one of the initial ones was, we simply didn't see these bugs everyone is experiencing in QA testing. And playing the game and seeing that it's gotten thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of bug fixes in the last 9 months, it's almost impossible to believe that. And there has been, any communication we've had has been kind of incorrect or false. We've had 2 roadmaps now, which promised at least vague dates for free DLC and the next-gen versions, and free DLC is already way delayed past when those roadmaps said, and the next-gen versions may lose its entire release window off into 2022. They are communicating literally nothing about what they have planned for the future. They may view this as, we don't want to talk about things because we were burned by that last time. And yet I think there's a difference between being cautious and complete and utter silence, like you are kind of ghosting your fan base. We have a game like Destiny 2, which was at least naming its big expansion, well over a year before it even came out, and they just had a giant presentation about it 6 months ahead of it coming out in 2022. Meanwhile, we know that CDPR has 2 multiplayer DLCs planned. They are not saying word one about them. We have no indication, even if we don't get a date. We don't know the topic. We don't know anything that's coming. The same goes for free DLC, which should be out before that. And these are all things that should be communicated going forward. And I feel like CDPR has a very, very sharp lack of an ability to do this. They tried something like this with the preview for the 1.3 patch, where they did a live stream with some of the community managers and some of the developers. It was terrible. Generally, I wouldn't say this is the fault of anyone on stream. They were forced to do a live demonstration instead of anything recorded, which resulted in some absurd moments like T-poses happening live on screen, glitches and bugs. And then they weren't given anything to show. Like we had been waiting for months and months and months for this free DLC, and we ended up with 2 jackets, a car, and a worse costume for Johnny Silverhands. And them touting, tiny changes like the cat having different places to sleep in your apartment. So it was a problem with scripting. It was a problem with the amount of content they were actually allowed to show off and talk about. But that is like the type of thing they should be doing in the future. And every other game, more or less, like any game that is still producing consistent updates, is doing this much better. There are games that have, weekly blog posts with insight from community managers and developers, community managers that communicate actively to players via Reddit or Twitter. And I understand that Cyberpunk especially is designated to get a lot of hate when that kind of communication comes up. And yet these are still things that need to happen. Like, you can't just keep posting screenshots like everyone doesn't have 1,000 questions about what's to come. And so what I've seen over the past 9 months is a company that is working diligently to fix a game that should not have been released for at least a year. And doing it after the fact makes it much harder. But also a studio that has no idea how to interact with 15 to 20 million people that purchased its game, want to know when it's going to be fixed, want to know when it's coming to next gen, want to know what free DLC is, want to know what expansions are, want to know what multiplayer things are maybe coming to it, and they are communicating none of it. So that is something that they really need to work on, which I've been saying for a long time, but they do not seem to be getting any better at it. So hopefully things turn around, and we'll see where things go from here.